welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. I'm Sunanda Jayasheelan. If it matters to you, well, it matters to us. We bring you India's biggest expert voices on a daily basis to interact with you, give you expert advice, and encourage and motivate you. Tonight, we're continuing our week-long special series on the education space, what has changed, what will change, and how are students and how is academia really keeping pace with this change, and what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs like yourself. All of that being covered in today's panel. Let's quickly dive right in and introduce our panelists. First up, Shashank Shwet. He's founder CEO ImaginXP. Abhay Chebbi, Pro-Chancellor, Alliance University, Bangalore. Abhishek Gupta, founder INACE.org and High School Moms. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time here on the show. As always, I want to ask both our entrepreneurs if you could talk to our viewers about, your business model. What would you like to tell us? Shashank, maybe I could start with you.
Sunanda, thank you so much for having me here. I'm Shashank. I'm the founder and CEO of ImaginXP. ImaginXP is a digital platform for higher education. We work in a B2B manner. That is, we tie up with universities and colleges and sell them degrees and subjects. So that's what we do.
Abhishek, how about you?
Thank you so much, Sananda, for having me. My name is Abhishek, and I'm the founder of India's only parent, student, and educator community called High School Moms. And today we are trying to bring career and college advisory and make it more inclusive and taking it to the masses, absolutely pro bono.
Let me pick up some statistics that I have, gone through, and I just want to read it out for the benefit of our viewers and for the three of you. In 2020, I understand 1.5 billion students in 188 countries were locked out of their schools. That was a situation a year and a half ago. A lot of schools, a lot of teaching institutions have been able to move to an online only model and move to it quickly, move to it effectively. But has that really resolved the challenges that the education system has faced and seen? What would you like to be able to tell us?
Hi, Sunanda. Thank you so much for inviting me. What has happened due to pandemic is something as disruptive also, but it has enabled us greatly. There is a fundamental change that we see in the way in which knowledge is imparted and disseminated. There is a creation of something called as a virtual learning environment or a virtual learning platform.
Sure.
What this has led to is almost a non-linear teaching and learning methodologies that they have been adopted and successfully adopted. This has led to, in fact, two things: an explosive growth of constructs and mental models. These constructs and mental models are put to use using technology to have a greater and a more enriching teaching learning experience. And we can deliberate more on that. But this is fundamentally change that we see. Use of technology forcibly, if I may say so, is that, think of this as an example. Students today have a great opportunity to share ideas, cross-functional ideas through cross-functional domains. Instructors and students have a greater collaboration by using small tools such as pop-in quizzes, breakout sessions.
Sure.
And in fact, the whole emphasis today is more on the content, the pedagogy, with a greater teaching and teacher-student interaction. At the same time, there are matrices that help us evaluate the learning outcomes. These learning outcomes, it's not that we did not have methodologies to evaluate that. The NEP, for example, talks about the higher order cognitive skills or thinking learning skills. What are these skills and how can technology enable us to do this? I'll tell you, it's like this. There is remembering, then there is understanding, then there is applying, then there is analysis, synthesizing it, evaluating, and then creating it. With the help of tools that are there in these learning platforms or the ones that Edtech companies now provide, it is more easier for a student to interact with another student. It is more easier for a student to evaluate what he has learned, or rather it is also greatly enabled the instructor to try and see how has the student understood the concept, and is he in a
Sure.
position to implement it.
Shashank?
Sure. Sunanda, basically the education ecosystem has been caught by surprise with the pandemic. Now, the March 2020, when you go back to that, if you had interacted with most ecosystem members of the education, higher education or schools,
Okay.
they were expecting this to be short-lived. They wanted to come back to the original business model in about 3 to 6 months or so. And now we are sitting 1.5 years down the line. There are about three things that has gone out and happened because of it. The first, the students have suffered. Now, this is a great disruption and an opportunity like entrepreneurs like us on the panel today.
Sure.
But the students are going through a great disruption, and there's a loss of learning that's happening because the students, by a surprise or on a date, has suddenly shifted from a classroom pedagogy to an online pedagogy.
Okay.
There are various advantages to it for sure. But then this small disruption of moving and adopting to a live virtual classroom has really created a loss of learning that we need to take care of in near future. The second thing that has happened is for the last 10 years or so, there are entrepreneurs who've been trying to get teachers and faculties online. The pandemic has made that possible quite quickly. So all the stakeholders on the universities and school side have gone out and adopted to technology with open arms. And that has been spearheaded by the faculties who've gone out and changed their pedagogy for online learning.
Okay.
And the third thing that's happened is that now university owners as well as school owners are looking at new business models that are open to them because they've lived through those 1.5 years. And hence the whole university partnership model coming out, a university embedded model coming out, a school embedded model or an after school model coming out, and then the whole Edtech market getting matured based on these business models. So these are the three main effects. There's a loss of learning for the students. The faculties and the university owners have adopted very well, and now there is an exploration of new business models that are happening. But yes, there are pros and cons for the whole disruption that has happened, and we need to make sure that the cons are something that we are taking a step on, taking an action on very quickly.
Abhishek, how about the fact that, while, yes, we've been talking about technology and how technology is really enabling that there's no loss of education, there is also the fact and the possibility that the divide between, those who are in, say, private schools in, say, tier 1, tier 2 markets has just gotten that much more from those maybe, in public schools in tier 3, tier 4 markets. I'm essentially trying to say the children who are at the bottom of the so-called pyramid, you think that gap has become even more and even more wide?
So thank you so much for that question. Sumita, I have a very counterintuitive approach to this. Number one, yes, there has been a lot of disruption from completely brick model of learning to completely click model of learning. And even when the students now, let's come back after COVID, I presume it will be click, brick, click model of learning forever. It's not going to be easy for the students to come back to the classrooms. I definitely agree that the curve has shifted and it was easier for the tier 1 and the so fortunate students to jump onto the digital bandwagon easily, whereas the marginalized and bottom of the pyramid students would have faced a lot of difficulty, primarily not just because of the learning getting shifted, but because of lack of internet access, data plans, equipments. There are too many other concerns in a country like India where things need to be really made more equitable and inclusive. And I really think that schools now have to change their model of functioning. While they have to be big leveler of sorts, they have to be equitable channel providers where they would possibly stop asking for admissions and infrastructure development funds and instead now will ask for technology enablement fund, which can then make this technological learning more inclusive. I completely agree with my fellow guests here who said that students have suffered. They definitely have. But I do not want to take the credit away from our educators. Imagine in a country like India, a Hindi teacher jumping onto a Zoom session overnight, even with her biological kids at home, spouses at home,
Sure.
and then trying to deliver a session. So learning has not stopped. Yes, our educators were not trained enough to deliver the in-person class over a digital format, because a digital format requires far different engagement models than in in-person classroom.
I have to take a quick commercial break on that note. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back with us here in Leaders of Tomorrow and Tonight. We're in conversation with a panel of experts talking about how education has been disrupted over the course of the pandemic and what changes we need to be prepared for. Abhay, since you primarily look at higher education, I want to understand from you how you've been able to use technology and how students are perhaps learning differently in this technology-led, technology-first, digital first kind of learning mode and model and method, and what you would like to tell us.
Sure, Sunanda. So great points, both of these. Let me start off by making this point very clear. A hybrid model, as one of the speakers did mention, that the click, brick, click, or whichever way you take it, this model is here to stay. Now, what happened when March 2020 came about? There was a sudden panic, and there was a need for everyone to immediately jump onto these online platforms. But the fundamental error that happened across, and of course, course correction has happened, is to replicate the classroom, the physical classroom model online. It is practically impossible. It is not possible for a faculty to look at 60 students or 120 students or whatever number that is. So there is a recalibration that has happened.
Sure.
From a teaching side. The student now is at the focal point, and he is at the center of all the learning that happens. There are, if, well, a virtual learning environment brings about availability, accessibility, and all of these good things, but it's for the privileged ones. Now, you look at what happened in China. The Chinese government went heavily on the edtech market, and they said, listen, there's going to be a huge socio-economic divide that's going to exist. The more privileged ones are going to, in fact, gain more. Now, coming back to your question, at a larger scale,
Sure.
there are three things. One is there is learning from a student point of view, from a teacher point of view. So there are different models that exist. Let's talk about the models a little later. But that's one. The second is, how can the governments and all, probably the ones who are not so well privileged, how can these guys get benefited by online learning? Because trust me, online learning has huge benefits. And third, can this self-sustain? Can this sustain in such a way it can grow by itself without intervention? The answer is a resounding yes, Sunanda. And I'll tell you how. The models that might fit for a higher education might not be the same for what it would be for a primary school run by the government.
All right.
We should look at radically different models such as smart classrooms. We should reduce the interaction of devices such as cell phones, etc., but base it on an instructor who is there in the classroom, who could guide the students, with a content guy available online being live streams to lakhs of students. So there are different models that exist. That's number one. Number two, and forward number one, the infrastructure spend will be in digital infrastructure, not in physical infrastructure. That's one.
Yeah.
Number two, now quickly going to how can we, what shall we say, enhance this learning experience so that this becomes a new normal. If the hybrid is spoken so much, I don't really like it. It's the new normal, right? It is for students who see that learning is their requirement, and they will look at all kinds of resources and content available. But universities, edtech startups are such platforms who curate content, put it in such a way that could be disseminated very well and also evaluated. This is my point, Sunanda.
Shashank was talking about the loss of learning, and I want to bring up the point of the emotional and the mental, cost, if I can call it that, that goes into having a system where you're only seeing people on a screen. And that is having an impact, I understand, and leading to somewhat of a loss of learning in a lot of students. Nearly half of them who've been surveyed in multiple surveys saying they haven't really been able to learn much or keep pace with what is being taught. This is, of course, I'm talking primary education, but how would you like to respond to this? And how can this perhaps be done?
We've cleared it as a fact that blended learning is something that's here to stay. There will be a very strong online component of the learning after or post pandemic, but blended learning is here to stay. Now, the loss of learning is mainly because of the surprise element of the pandemic hitting the education ecosystem very quickly over the last 1.5 years. The technology was not ready to make sure that you could go out and personalize the education. Also, the fact that you can enable cohort learning. And there's a lot to be done over the next decade to make sure that the student ROI of each classroom can be calculated, and technology will have a very good, prominent role to play out there. This is the starting of the whole disruption that's happening right now. And because we've moved on to rudimentary methods of a live virtual classroom, get a Zoom player from here, get your teams together onto an email or onto a chat group or to a WhatsApp group so that you can start disseminating information and assignments and so on and so forth, get them onto a Google form so that they can go out and do a test. This is what most of the students in the school and universities have gone out and adopted to over the last 1.5 years. What has this given us? It has given us two things. It has given us the runway and a behavior change that has happened for the students and faculties to start using these free tools and start teaching online, and hence you can create amazing experiences of a live virtual classroom with the faculty and students coming in together, and then can break away in small cohort learning classrooms and create collaboration at the same time online with mentors who are corporate coaches sitting in the US or Europe and so on and so forth, are all models then that can become a new normal post the pandemic, the market opens up.
Abhishek, higher education, vocational training, all of that requires a very hands-on approach. So in this era of tech first, digital first, how is that segment or that section really of the training and skills? How is that perhaps changed, or what changes are we seeing there?
So, Sunanda, my perspective is going to be a little different because I'm not an Edtech player right now. I'm a community builder with 6 million parents and students feedback coming to me on daily basis, and 3,000 schools associated with me with in terms of school principals and counselors. I hear what students are, and if I quickly tell you, student was more free within the rules and regulations of the school than under the four watchful eyes of the parents. You have to understand that. So to come to your point where you were talking about emotional and mental health, that's severely taken a toll. And the entire edtech ecosystem has to rise up to the occasion to come up with innovative solutions where both emotional and mental health can also be mapped in terms of matrices.
Okay.
For me, High School Moms is a classic example where, because of this COVID impact, we were able to make college career advisory accessible to the interiors, tier 2, tier 3 cities. I get students from Bardwan and the interiors of Orissa. And I can tell you that democratization of information has definitely happened. Having said that, come to your second part of the question, there are humongous opportunities. Let's take an example in higher education, certain lab-based courses. There is a great opportunity for edutainment industry. There is a great opportunity for toys manufacturers to come up with compact kits for students to be able to experiment at home. Maybe they can tie up with the school chains and make it accessible so that everybody can have access to mini labs sort of concept, because hybrid learning is here to stay. It has its own advantages. It is not going to go anywhere. There are some people like Shashank who have built an edtech ecosystem. There are some people like me who have built a community. Later on, you might see Shashank and Abhishek of the world collaborating with one another and trying to come up with opportunities for the students at large. Having said that, there's too much of opportunities available for the edutainment segment, which has not been really focused. in terms of games, in terms of quizzes, in terms of even toys and kits available for students to practice laboratories at home.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here on the show. Completely out of time. If you have any feedback, do let us know. Our contact details are coming up on the screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.